It started as just another busy morning at a high-rise corporate office downtown. Employees were rushing in, clutching coffee cups, preparing for an important quarterly meeting. But no one expected the tension that would erupt inside the gleaming, glass boardroom. A respected black employee was suddenly called out, humiliated, and branded a liar by a powerful white executive right in front of everyone. But what came next silenced the room. Because within minutes, the man who thought he had all the power was about to be exposed in a way he never imagined. And the truth? It left every single person in that building stunned. Marcus Daniels was not just another employee. At 34 years old, he was one of the most hard-working analysts in the company's finance department, known for his precision, late nights, and problem-solving skills. Marcus had become the go-to for big projects. He was a tall, sharp-looking man with warm brown skin, short-cropped hair, and a professional, modest style. Despite his reputation for excellence, he often felt the subtle weight of being one of the only black professionals in his division. That morning was different. It was the company's quarterly review, the day when months of work would be presented to the board. Marcus had led the analysis on a multi-million-dollar merger deal that could change the company's future. He had prepared for weeks, double-checking every figure, every projection, every slide. But there was someone who never seemed to like him, Richard Caldwell, a senior white executive in his 50s. Richard was known for his arrogance, his expensive tailored suits, and his belief that younger employees, especially Marcus, didn't belong at his level. As the meeting began, the room filled with polished executives and a quiet tension. Marcus stepped forward to present. But just as he began explaining his analysis, Richard leaned back in his chair with a smirk. Ready to tear him down, Marcus walked the boardroom through the merger projections, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside. Charts lit up the screen behind him. Revenue growth, market expansion, risk assessments, everything was supported by data. But Richard, arms folded, kept shaking his head. Finally, he cut Marcus off mid-sentence. "That's not true," Richard barked, his voice echoing through the glass walls. "Those numbers are completely wrong. You're misleading this board. Either you don't know what you're talking about, or you're flat-out lying." The room fell silent. Marcus froze, the words hanging heavy in the air. Colleagues glanced at one another nervously, some averting their eyes. For a black man who had worked twice as hard to prove himself, being publicly branded a liar felt like a punch to the gut. Richard didn't stop there. He leaned forward, his tone dripping with condescension. "This is why I said from the beginning you weren't ready for projects like this. Maybe next time, leave the real work to people who understand the stakes." Marcus felt his chest tighten. His credibility, his reputation, his career, all of it was under attack in front of the highest-ranking people in the company. He wanted to defend himself. But before he could speak, Richard waved a dismissive hand. "This entire projection is fabricated," Richard declared. "If we presented this to investors, it would destroy us. I've been in this business for 25 years, and I know a lie when I see one." A few people shifted uncomfortably, but others, especially junior employees who had seen Marcus's dedication, looked on with disbelief. They knew his work was thorough. But Richard was powerful, and no one dared to challenge him. Marcus took a deep breath, steadying himself. He wanted to argue, to fight back, but in that moment he realized he didn't have to. Because what Richard didn't know was that someone far above him, someone who had already reviewed Marcus's work in detail, was about to step into the conversation. Just as Richard finished his tirade, the double doors at the back of the boardroom opened. In walked Eleanor Shaw, the company's CEO, a commanding woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and silver hair. Eleanor carried a presence that instantly commanded silence. "Continue," she said calmly, glancing at Marcus. Richard straightened, suddenly eager to impress. "Eleanor, I'm glad you're here. We were just addressing a serious issue. This employee," he said, motioning dismissively toward Marcus, "has presented projections that are not only inaccurate, but deliberately misleading." "I don't know how this even made it into the meeting." The CEO raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Instead, she turned toward the screen. Marcus, with quiet dignity, resumed his explanation, carefully walking her through the analysis. He highlighted the sources, the verification, the peer reviews, and the external audits that had confirmed his projections. When he finished, Eleanor slowly looked back at Richard. Her silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, she spoke. "Richard, you should know something. Not only are these numbers accurate, but this entire report was reviewed and approved by me personally last night. Marcus's work is flawless, and the fact that you would stand here and call him a liar tells me everything. I need to know, not about him, but about you." The room went still. Richard's smug expression crumbled. He stammered, trying to backtrack, but Eleanor's eyes were cold and sharp. "For years I've heard complaints about your arrogance, your inability to respect colleagues, and your biased treatment of employees. Today you've confirmed those complaints for everyone in this room. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your role. HR will be in touch." Gasps filled the air. Richard's face flushed red as he gathered his papers and stormed out, humiliated. When the doors closed behind Richard, silence hung in the boardroom. Then slowly a wave of applause began, directed not at Eleanor but at Marcus. His colleagues, once too afraid to speak up, now acknowledged what they had always known: his brilliance, his integrity, and his resilience in the face of injustice. Marcus didn't smile. Instead, he exhaled deeply, the weight of years of quiet battles against subtle racism pressing down on him. For so long, he had worked in the shadows, determined not to let bias define him. And today, the truth had finally been seen. After the meeting, Eleanor approached him privately. "Marcus," she said, "you belong here. Don't let anyone ever convince you otherwise." Those words stayed with him. But even more powerful was the lesson others took away. Because what happened in that boardroom wasn't just about one executive being fired. It was about the reality that racism, whether subtle or blatant, has no place in any workplace. Richard had believed his status made him untouchable, that his words would always carry more weight than a black employee's. But the truth proved otherwise, and the ripple effect was undeniable. Younger employees spoke openly about discrimination. Policies were strengthened, and the company culture shifted, one step closer toward fairness. For Marcus, it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about finally being recognized, not for the color of his skin, but for the excellence of his work. And for the viewers watching this story unfold, the takeaway is clear. Asterisk, asterisk, when injustice goes unchallenged, it thrives. But when truth stands tall, it silences even the loudest voices of prejudice. Asterisk, asterisk. So the next time you witness unfairness, ask yourself, will you stay silent, or will you be the one to speak up?